Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Verville. Today we are tackling this area shown on the screen right now, and you probably don't remember how exactly this area looked back in the day, because what I show you right now is already the revamped area, or at least partially revamped. I decided to include this dive-in clip again, like in the older videos, so you get an idea in what area on the map we are working on today, and you probably realize that it's almost the same area as last time, but this part of the map really needs some attention, and there are multiple reasons for it. First of all, the traffic is really bad in that area, because all the traffic that is coming from the main city is passing through the highway here and going into the valleys and the villages everywhere. And as you can see, it's just a very narrow and tiny road that leads all the traffic almost through the suburb there, while passing this totally oversized intersection, which really doesn't fit in that landscape or Switzerland for that matter at all. So I needed to come up with a solution to distribute the traffic somehow in that area without having such a huge interchange, while also connecting the Caesar mountain highway we built in the last episode, and without having highways going absolutely everywhere and occupying too much space. So I started off with drawing the general directions of the streets with these vanilla roads, because obviously you don't just dive in right off with the Caesar networks. And then I followed these general guidelines I drew earlier with the Caesar roads and built some very basic interchanges and one big intersection with some slip lanes for better traffic flow. And this works actually pretty well with the traffic volume. Now, before I was saying there were multiple reasons for me doing a revamp for this area, and another reason was that I just wasn't happy with the looks of it. It just looked a little bit generic, and I didn't use the very best assets, and I actually felt like it would be a really nice spot for another smaller suburb and for me to practice a little bit building suburbs, because I was mostly working in the main city all the time and didn't have a lot of experience in just developing some villages and stuff. And I know I'm definitely gonna use that experience in the future for building mountain villages and the ski resort I've been teasing for I don't know how long already. But believe it or not, this has actually been a really tricky build for me. It took me almost 2 weeks to finish it. I had to restart it a couple of times, and I really don't know, somehow it just worked in the end, somehow. But anyway, I was just putting together some building complexes. I thought they have been built at the same time by the same architect, placed down some parking lots and I don't know, some kind of mod to force zoning, and put these modern generic looking buildings next to these parking lots. And then I thought it would be nice to have some varieties with these parking lots as well, so I went for the 45-degree tilted ones, but obviously they are clipping the terrain underneath it, so I had to use plumbable asphalt, sink it down a little bit using PO to cover that glitch in the terrain, and rearrange these housing estates a bit. As you can see here, I also put the very narrow pedestrian path next to these parking lots, just to add a little bit more width to this whole area. And it's so cool because these pedestrian paths, in general, all the pedestrian paths, they have set a higher pedestrian walking speed to it. That's why all the Sims are using pedestrian path over sidewalks. With the surface brush I filled in the gaps in the texture, and as you can see I added some other details like this vanilla playground asset. And in these housing estates I placed some of these residential block buildings just to boost the population a bit more. And from time to time I rearranged all these individual houses. And I did this step by step because I had no real life inspiration for this whole suburb. I built this only from my imagination. And now on screen is my build of the train station, which is the Altenburg train station asset from Titan. But it was way too big for this little suburb, so I did my very best to kind of squeeze that building together so it still looks good, using PO obviously. And as you saw, I really wanted to keep that clock on the building itself, together with these statues, so I disconnected these vertices from the asset and dragged them over to that part of the building, and hid all of these leftover vertices inside the asset itself. Then I quickly checked from every angle if it looked somewhat okay and dragged it back to the actual train station and placed it where it belongs. But then I figured it looks kind of lonely, just the main entrance with the clock on it there. And so I tried to attach the same asset again to it while shrinking it down and really squeeze it into place there. And again, it was quite tricky to hide all these vertices somewhere without having them Z-fighting all the time. So this also took me quite some time to do. But with the scale function of the PO mod, it's actually not too tricky to just kind of group these vertices together, then just use the scale function and squeeze this whole group very close to each one another, and then you can hide it directly into the asset itself. Now, I wouldn't be a quote-unquote professional YouTuber without mentioning that any like and subscription would be highly appreciated. I'm actually really hyped these days, despite being swamped with university stuff. But we actually gained almost 100 subscribers in only 14 days, which is an insane number to me for such a small channel. And while we're at it, I wanted to explicitly thank my two Patreons, Jason and James. Thank you so much for your support. You have no idea what a motivational support that was to see you guys supporting me over on Patreon. Thank you so much for that. And if you want to support me with what I do and you like the content and you want to have early access to the videos like Jason and James, then head over to Patreon and select between 3 different tiers. You can choose between $1, $2 or $5 a month, and what exactly your reward will be, we can discuss that over on Patreon. I'm totally open to give you my save game, all my color settings, or whatever is useful to you. I also have an Instagram account where I post additional pictures of my projects, the Citadel as well as Verville. So if you would like to have some additional content, you can head over to Instagram. Or if you would like to contribute to my projects and give your inputs and discuss our, cool assets that would fit very well to the projects, then yeah, join my server on Discord. But enough with the shameless self-promotion. So let's talk what exactly am I doing here on screen. I'm just developing the square in front of this train station, and I just went for a very generic layout, namely a bus terminal in front of the station, which I designed in a very Swiss fashion with these yellow zigzag lines, which indicates where the bus stops. And placed down some benches and ticket vending machines. And a very common problem you probably also experienced before in City Skylines is that it's really tricky to place decals that are on the height of the sidewalk without having them appearing on the ground level or the asphalt level where the cars drive. But very often you still want to distinguish between the area where the people can walk and the actual asphalt. So how can you get around this issue? And that's when I had this idea using the pedestrian asset pack that comes with 1 to 8 meter width, and just place the wider pedestrian path under this bus terminal, so it has a different texture than the other ground without having to fiddle around with all the decals and stuff. So it's a pretty efficient way and it looks quite good in my opinion. Then I added some curb networks and this little taxi stand to just fill this square in front of the station, some more decals and props here and there to just make this area feel not that empty. You maybe feel like this area is a bit over the top in terms of train station size and public transport in general, but the idea I have for this place in the future is that it's kind of the starting point for the future mountain railway that goes way up in the mountains to the ski resort, which will be a really nice opportunity to do some nice landscaping stuff. Yeah, so I think a lot of tourists will use that area in the future to travel to the mountains, and that's why I designed this whole area quite generously. And at that point I realized that I totally forgot to place a church in the area, because you know how it is in Europe, churches are absolutely everywhere and the common spot to place the church is on top of a hill. So I created one, again with these retaining walls from Verville, which look absolutely awesome. Unfortunately the church asset itself is a bit bright and I think quite old as well, but I turned it into PO later on and used Titan's technique to place a color text field on top of the texture from the church to turn down the brightness a bit. And you probably saw me quickly moving over to Verville itself to get the right orientation for it, so all the churches are facing the same direction. Then I copy-pasted these network segments from these retaining walls and placed them all around the church to create the nice outline. I split this retaining wall segment up in 2 separate pieces to add stairs in between, so people have access from every direction to the church. And last but not least, placing down a lot of greenery, trees, bushes, flowers and all that stuff, which is always a very satisfactory moment. Now, this is a more recent build. I actually didn't plan originally to include that part into the video, but then I decided to cut out a bit of the detailing parts because they can get a bit too repetitive. So what I am doing here is starting off the mountain rail I was talking about before. I figured if I wanted to show some cinematics from further away, it just wouldn't look good because I had a lot of unfinished area in the back. Yeah, so I decided to already start with this mountain railway. And here you got a brief look where this railway will go to in the future. As you can see, I managed to lay down these rail tracks very close next to the road that's going parallel next to the rail tracks. And for that I used the parallel roads tool. This is actually a very powerful mod because you can create perfectly parallel lines with any networks in the game. So I chose these one lane two-way rail tracks together with a vanilla road I edited in the asset editor a little bit, so cars actually drive in the middle of the road itself and not sticking to the center. And I also deleted the parking feature of this vanilla road. And now it's actually usable for this rural purpose. As you can see, I also played around with the color settings again. It looks now a bit more saturated and warmer. And I personally prefer that look over the old one. But obviously it's gonna look a lot different for all of you guys. I don't know what kind of screens you are using. I have my TV as a reference monitor. And I just changed the settings so it looks good on my TV. But it would be great to get some feedback of you guys if it looks okay for you as well. But another thing concerning the graphics settings is that you notice that from time to time the whole image just glitches somehow. It went totally dark, and the issue seems to be with the render it mod. For some reason when I place down random stuff, it doesn't really matter what kind of asset it is. It just turned off the color grading feature of it, and I had to deactivate and activate it again, so I have no idea what caused that issue. It's actually the first time this happened. So if you know the issue or had a similar experience with render it, please let me know down in the comments. Maybe I should get rid of that mod because it's not sustainable working like that. But anyway, we are right at the end of today's episode of Verville. I really hope you enjoyed this rather versatile episode. As always, if you got that far into this video, please leave a like. It really helps this channel out, and if you want to see more in the future, consider subscribing. The goal of 1000 subscribers until the end of the year seems pretty realistic these days actually. And if you want to stay totally up to date, follow me on Instagram. I post a lot of screenshots there. And as mentioned before, if you just want to chat or contribute your ideas to my projects, head over to Discord and join my server over there. But that's been it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Take care and see you next time.